Understanding Dementia, Part 4, Progression. Dementia is a progressive disease, which means that it gets worse over time. As mentioned previously, although there are several different diseases that cause dementia, they eventually become quite similar in their symptoms. The most commonly used way to reference the progression is the three-stage model. The stages are referred to either as early, middle, and late stage, or as mild dementia, moderate dementia, and severe dementia. Some healthcare professionals use the Global Deterioration Scale, also called Risberg's scale after the person who created it, to measure the progression of Alzheimer's disease. This scale divides Alzheimer's disease into 7 stages of ability. Although we usually discuss progression using the 3-stage model, we also mention this 7-stage model primarily so that you can understand or ask better questions if a healthcare provider says something to you about a stage of dementia beyond number 3, or if what they are referencing doesn't seem to make sense in the 3-stage model. It's important to clarify which of the models they're using. This is called the Global Deterioration Scale because it begins with no decline. So all of us are somewhere on this deterioration scale. So stage 1 is no cognitive decline at all. Stage 2 is very mild cognitive decline, forgets names and locations of objects, may have trouble finding words. This is what we call natural age-related changes. Many of us experience this very mild decline as we age. By stage 3, mild cognitive decline, the changes are beginning to be noticeable both to the person experiencing them and to people around them. They may have difficulty traveling to new locations or difficulty handling problems at work. This may be diagnosed as mild cognitive impairment or MCI. Stage 4 is moderate cognitive decline. The person has difficulty with complex tasks, things like finances, shopping, planning dinner for guests, trying to get a meal on the table with multiple dishes coming timing-wise, being ready all at the same time. This would be considered mild Alzheimer's disease. Stage 5, moderately severe cognitive decline. The person needs help to choose clothing, likely needs prompting to bathe. This is considered moderate Alzheimer's disease. Stage 6, severe cognitive decline. Generally, the person has a loss of awareness of recent events and experiences. They require assistance in bathing, and it isn't unusual for a person to have a fear of bathing. They have a decreased ability to use the toilet, or they may be incontinent. This is considered moderately severe Alzheimer's disease. Stage 7, very severe cognitive decline. Vocabulary becomes limited, eventually declining to single words. The person loses the ability to walk and sit and requires help with eating. However, today we're going to look a bit more at the symptoms associated with the 3 stages. It's very important as I go through these next few slides and talk about the symptoms to keep the earlier images of the brain in mind, particularly the image showing the deterioration of the brain. While that was a picture of very advanced Alzheimer's disease, the reason that it's important to keep it in mind, even in these earlier stages, is that the symptoms that I'll talk about are related to physical changes in the brain, and they are not in the control of the person experiencing the changes. Early stages of dementia are already beyond what we would consider normal, age-related memory decline, and the changes are beginning to make an impact on the person's daily life. The other thing to keep in mind as we go over these next few slides is that the symptoms are common symptoms. Each individual with dementia will be different, and they will not necessarily experience every symptom. We generally talk about the changes in kind of 4 big areas. So in mental symptoms, we will see in early stages of dementia mild forgetfulness, misplacing objects, perhaps a limited attention span, increased difficulty with communication, finding the right word, an increased difficulty learning new things. And this can be very apparent if people are retiring and moving. It's quite common for people to move when they retire, and we certainly have had families where that was the trigger to get a diagnosis, when the person who was diagnosed with dementia eventually simply couldn't learn the new neighborhood or had difficulty learning the layout of the apartment. There can be difficulty following conversations and problems with orientation. That is, the person might get lost even in their old familiar neighborhood. In the emotional arena, moods shift easily, and the person may experience depression. There may be a loss of interest in social activities, and the person may initiate activity less often, but they'll be interested in participating when they get there. Often, people in the early stages of dementia tell us that they feel they are judged as being lazy. And so it's particularly important for both caregiver and person living with dementia to understand that this change is very likely because of a deterioration of the part of the brain that switches us on and allows us to initiate an activity. So the person isn't lazy, they're not choosing to be less active, but in fact, the part of the brain that actually moves us to action may be the part of the brain that's damaged. In physical activities, there may be mild coordination problems. You may see the person bump into things more often, or you may find that you trip more often. In behavior, it's of a variety of things. There may be more passiveness, or there may be more restlessness, or both, depending on the time of day. The person may become a bit withdrawn. In mid-stage of dementia, things begin to intensify. And again, these are common symptoms, and people will not necessarily experience every one. In the mental arena, there's continued and intensified memory problems. The person may begin to be forgetful about their personal history. Potentially, they may have an inability to recognize family and friends. This can be very, very distressing, both for the person living with dementia who forgets and for the family. I like to point out that often in this stage, the person has not actually forgotten family and friends, but they may not recognize the exterior package. I don't know about you, but I don't look the way I did when I was 20 or 30 or 15. And so depending which person, which age the person is remembering, they may not recognize the exterior changes that have come with age. I think that's important for both of you to know, because it doesn't mean that you have forgotten the person or that you have been forgotten, just that you may not be recognized in that moment. There may be a disorientation of time and place. Increasing language difficulties. You may find the vocabulary is quite shrunken, and so precise language becomes more difficult. And there may be visual spatial problems. In the emotional area, we begin to see personality changes. There may be anxiety or suspiciousness, increasing mood shifts, anger, perhaps sadness or depression. There could be hostility, apprehension, certainly unlikely to initiate social activities, and in the mid-stage of dementia, there may be actually resistance to going to events or insistence on leaving soon after arrival. In the behavioral arena, there's a declining ability to concentrate. There may be an increase in restlessness, for example, pacing back and forth or leaving to go on walks. Repetition, delusions. There can be aggression triggered by stimulus around, uninhibited behaviors, and passiveness. And in physical changes, there is an increased assistance required for daily tasks, for example, dressing, bathing, going to the toilet. Disrupted sleep patterns, or the person may require more sleep. They may sleep during the day and be awake at night. And you're likely to see appetite fluctuations. In the late stages of dementia, the changes are much more profound, and it can be very difficult to hear about these symptoms of late-stage dementia, and you may not be ready to hear about these changes. You may want to mute the sound until you see the next slide, and that's just fine. I would ask you to consider connecting with the First Link Dementia Helpline, or to talk to staff in your local resource center, or look at the resources on our website. There are 2 very good information handouts available as part of the Progression series, one on late stage and one on end of life. You may want to use the search on our website. So changes in the mental arena is very profound short and long-term memory loss. There may be an inability to process information. We tend to see severe communication impairment with very, very limited vocabulary and a significant disorientation about time, place, and people. The person may still feel emotions but have profound difficulty expressing them. And as a result, behavior may become a way of nonverbal communication and may become a way of expressing pain or unmet needs. The person may withdraw completely. The person sleeps longer and much more often. They're usually unable to walk independently or at all. There may be a complete loss of the ability to speak, often loss of bladder and bowel control. There may be difficulty eating or swallowing. The person is unable to dress or bathe, and they may lose weight. As we talk about all these different symptoms, it's very important to keep in mind that these scales represent a general description of patterns. They are not specific to individuals. If you have met one person with dementia, you have met one person with dementia. Everyone's brain is different. The brain damage happens in different ways and different parts of the brain for each person. Individuals may not move precisely through the stages. Some early stage symptoms can begin in mid-stage for some people. For some individuals, a typical mid-stage symptom may appear in early stages. It all depends on where the protein deposits or vascular changes are causing damage in the brain. The decline might look different depending on the exact form of dementia as well. It's common for people with Lewy body dementia to have fluctuations in their cognition, up and down. People with Alzheimer's disease tend to decline slowly and steadily, whereas with vascular dementia, the decline can be more stepwise, depending on how often and where the strokes occur. Therefore, the stages are not exact. It's also not possible to estimate the time it will take to move through the stages. That varies from person to person as well. Nor is it possible to estimate the life expectancy of someone who is diagnosed. Progression differs according to many factors, including other medical conditions that the person is living with at the same time as dementia. It's also been it's been established in research that the protein changes that cause Alzheimer's disease in particular can start to form 15 to 30 years before the onset of symptoms. Therefore, it's impossible to know precisely how long the individual has had the disease before they receive a diagnosis. If you have questions about any of the information you've heard or any other questions about living with dementia, please don't hesitate to call one of our FirstLink Dementia helplines Monday to Friday between 9 and 4.